Now, I put up videos about this subject in the past. Videos were shut down because it's a very touchy subject. You know, you can criticize the white male all day long, but non-white people can't be criticized, ever. And there's some serious problems with the black community. Is one of the reasons why I want to bring this up. Because it's not just hurting the blacks, it's hurting everybody. So, you know, and the problem is if a non-black person criticizes or tries to mention their problems with the black community, he's automatically labeled a racist, especially if he's white. But if a black person does it, well, he's considered to be a traitor, an Uncle Tom, you know. But the thing is, there are serious problems with the black community, and the media kind of is encouraging this to continue. I notice a lot of blacks don't respect anybody, including each other. I drove for Lyft for a while, and 9 out of 10 times they'd sit there and make me wait until the last few seconds before I would cancel and get a cancel fee. And 9 out of 10 of them would wait till near the end of it before they'd come out of the house. With white people, is 1 in 10. And like that, there's just hardly any of them respect anybody, including each other. Like they always call each other the N-word. You know, obviously, you know, they wouldn't be calling each other that if they respected each other. The thing is, they'll joke about calling each other the N-word. Anyone else calls them the N-word, they want to beat you to death. And they will sometimes beat people to death. Like one not too long ago, 57-year-old woman picked her up and slammed her on the concrete, broke several of her bones, seriously injured her. Because he thought she said the N-word. It turns out she didn't say the N-word. His sister said she said the N-word, but she didn't. So she's been highly assaulted because he thought she said the N-word. You know, as a white kid growing up, my dad said, you know, complaining about kids calling me names, I'd say, well, my dad says, just say sticks and stones may break my bones, but names will never hurt me. But apparently blacks, if somebody calls you a name, you beat them to death. Or if somebody steps on your shoe, you beat them to death. I mean, that seems to be what they do. You know, it seems to be, I think, lack of respect and oversensitivity to any form of criticism. And blacks generally, they vote Democrat because they've been programmed to believe the Democrats are there to help them out. The Democrats, you know, building them housing projects and giving them free handouts and things like this doesn't really help. In the long run, it causes problems. And the Republicans, at least, they do things that lower the unemployment rate, which is probably the best thing for all people, including blacks. But you got these issues here, like, you know, even there's a few black leaders, even like Martin Luther King commented about this disproportionately large number of crime committed by blacks. I mean, yeah, I know there's other races that commit crime too, of course. But it seems like the percentage is much higher in the black community. And if you mention that, you're a racist. You know. And, you know, you have these 12-step groups, you know, like Alcoholics Anonymous and stuff. The first step is to acknowledge you have a problem. I mean, how can you solve a problem if you can't even acknowledge it? You can't even talk about it. You know, and that's the problem. If you're white and you mention this, you're a racist. If you're black and you mention this, you're a sellout, a traitor, Uncle Tom, you know. So, I mean, the problem goes on generation after generation, and if anything, it gets worse. And some of this may have had its roots in slavery. You know, blacks were abused, mistreated. And when you abuse people, then they become abusive, and then they abuse their children. And I see a tremendous amount of child abuse, you know, among blacks. Now, there are millions of blacks in this country who consider that to be good parenting. You know, it's that black cop was saying, you know, wish we had more parents out there that took charge of their kids.
And if you saw on one scene, you had one mother who grabbed their child who had a hood on his head, and she started smacking him on the head because she was so embarrassed. I wish I had more parents that took charge of the kids out there tonight.
she's abusing the hell out of him. It's one of the reasons he behaves the way he does. When you abuse children, and this isn't the first time she's hit this kid. She's been hitting him since he came out of the womb, okay? And slapping him down, beating him up, and this is why he acts the way he does. The reason she acts the way she does is that's the way her mother treated her and her parents. And on and on and on it goes. Where it stops, nobody knows. Another thing is sexual immorality. It's becoming rampant everywhere, not just in the black community, but especially in the black community. It's, they were talking about all this murder going on, and like in Chicago and stuff. And I was listening to some kids they were interviewing on the street, and about what's the solution. Trump was thinking, well, more cops are the solution, and they're asking these kids on the street, no, more cops ain't gonna make any difference. But the problem is a couple of generations ago, you had a large percentage of blacks growing up without fathers. Okay, there was no father figure, no stable mother, father, family situation they were growing up in. That was a couple generations ago. Nowadays, you got them; they're not even growing up with mothers. At least this mother's with her kid. A lot of them are crack hoes who dump their kids on the street. And so now they're growing up without fathers or mothers. Gangs are the only choice they have for a family, so they join the gang. The problem is the gangs require them to commit crimes. And if you really want to rise up high in the gang and rise up high to a high level in the gang, the best way is if you shoot from the enemies of your gang, the other gang members. That's the best way. Of course, you do that kind of thing. There's two things that are going to happen. You're either going to end up dead, or you're going to end up in jail. So that's where this goes. This goes on in the media. It makes the problem worse by constantly fueling this hatred that blacks especially have towards white. Because, how many millions movies, TV shows, books, magazines, talk shows have gone on and on and on about white people being evil to blacks? It's going on. I take the lynchings, for instance. They go on and on about it. They've mentioned it at least 1 million times in 1 million different places. They never tell you the whole story behind these lynchings. For instance, I used to live up in Duluth, and they got a memorial to these 3 blacks who were lynched back in, I think it was 1920. And every year they have a little thing getting together to speak out against racism, but they never tell you the full story. Okay? It was 6 or 7 blacks, gang raped a young teenage woman, gang raped her while holding her boyfriend at gunpoint. I got this by going back into the library and looking at the old newspapers from the time period. And so obviously a lot of people were extremely upset about that. Is gang raping a woman, a young teenage woman who was probably a virgin, was probably extremely violent, painful, and it's not like teenage girls nowadays. A few of them are virgins. In those days, most women were virgins. So I'm sure it was physically and psychologically a very painful experience for her. It really ticked off the community, and they broke into jail. And there were 3 that they decided not to lynch or hang because they couldn't decide whether these guys were guilty or not. Of those 3 that they didn't lynch, one of them was found guilty and sentenced. I heard one source 1 year, another source 4 years in Stillwater Penitentiary. Even 4 years, a relatively light sentence for gang rape, in my opinion. And that's maybe one of the reasons why they stormed the jail. But, these guys weren't innocent victims. They're being made out like they're victims, okay? Gang raping a teenage girl is kind of serious, man. But the media's making them out. They're the victims, and the woman accused them of rape is the victimizer, And this goes on over and over. This recent thing, this guy, these rednecks just went up and shot this guy jogging. That's what the media is telling you. That's bullcrap. The guy, if you look at the whole story, he was caught red-handed trying to break into this guy's garage and steal. Okay, he was caught in the act. He was very brazen, very cocky, very arrogant about it. They called the cops. and these other two guys decided they were going to be vigilantes and try to hold him until the cops got here. They didn't want him to get away. Okay, so they grabbed their rifles, went after him. So one of them stood in the street, and they show clips of this, but they don't show the whole thing. And he's saying, telling him to stop it. The black ran up, grabbed the gun, and punched this guy in the face. And so the guy realized he's going to try to take his gun and shoot him. So he decided he's going to shoot him first. It's basically an act of self-defense, is in my opinion. The guy's there stealing. Somebody tries to stop him, and then he tries to take the gun from the guy telling him to stop, and he was going to try to shoot him, so he shot him first. It's self-defense, in my opinion. But, of course, the media's touting it out. They just shot, this rednecks just shot this poor innocent black guy for no reason. It's the same thing like this Zimmerman Martin case. The media was showing pictures of this 12-year-old Martin. He was actually 17. They took a picture of him when he's 12. Doctored up, made him look like an angel, made him sound like he's just some sweet innocent, and it was being touted as a white on black crime. Zimmerman was a Hispanic Jew. No mention about a Hispanic on white on black crime. No mention of a Jew. Sure, definitely. No, you wouldn't mention Jew on black crime. You know, it's being touted as a white on black crime and this evil, horrible white brute. When the fact that Martin was there, he was 6'1", he was a thug, he was there to steal. He tried to take the gun from Zimmerman at a neighborhood watch, trying to defend his neighborhood, and Zimmerman managed to get a shot off and killed Martin. If it had been the other way around, you'd never heard it. The media wouldn't have mentioned a word about it. If Martin had managed to get the gun away and shot Zimmerman and killed him, it would never have been mentioned. He probably would have gotten away, and he'd eventually been arrested for something else because he was a thug, and that's the life he was going to live. But the media is pushing this stuff. It's revamping it. In all these cases where they show white cops shooting blacks, I mean, it's headlines. There's all kinds of black on white crime. Never gets talked about. It's usually buried, or they're suppressed, or they try to make little of it. And so it's the media, and I know why they're doing this. I know who they are. I can't say much about that, or this video will be shut down. It's already threatened to be shut down because, well, the white male is fair game. You can criticize the white male all day. You can make up lies about the white male. That's perfect. You can't criticize blacks, Hispanics, women. You definitely can't criticize Jews. But the white male, you can slander all day long. It's perfectly okay. You know, it's like you can't acknowledge white male has ever done anything good for blacks. And this is something that always bothers me. There were white people who ran the Underground Railroad. You know, look it up if you don't know what it is. I've never seen her black even acknowledge that, much less show any gratitude or appreciation for it. There were millions of white people who fought in the Civil War to try to end slavery. Never mentioned, much less thanked. There's thousands of whites who died in the Civil War. Never acknowledged, much less thanked. I've gotten in a couple arguments with some black friends in the past about Lincoln. You know, I said he freed the slave. Oh, he just did that for political reasons. I cannot acknowledge that any white person has ever done anything positive for blacks ever in this. That goes against the whole, and the media pushes that. The media wants blacks to hate whites. They want to create this tension. They want to create this hate, and they want to keep the child abuse going. Okay, it's the child abuse and sexual immorality. Part of that, I think, comes from slavery. They were abused, and blacks were typically used as sex slaves. So blacks, on the whole, don't have a real strong need for sexual morality. They typically screw around, go out and have sex with whoever, and not much concern about creating a stable family environment for their children. And then generational abuse continues, and it never ends. And I'm saying this because it's a serious problem that's affecting everybody, blacks as well as not blacks, because, you know, this needs to be dealt with, and it's not being dealt with.